Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Hokyoji Sunday Talk. For those who may watch this film in the future, my name is Reverend Kyoko Tracy Whalen, and I am a happy resident here at Hokyoji. I'm pleased to announce that our speaker this morning is Ryushin Jan Freier, who's been practicing for a long time. Let's see, my notes say that he's been practicing since at least 1985. And he has been a member of several sanghas, including MZMC, Clouds-in-Water, and Hokyoji. And he is a partaker of many sangha offerings. I think that's all we need to say. Ryushin, take it away.
Morning. So I'm going to start with a quote from the Sounds True online kind of a set of offerings. It says, how can you create a life of exceptional fulfillment, purpose, and joy? So this is one of the kind of headlines on that site that really disturbs me, that they're actually promoting this kind of thing. So if you're here to create a life of exceptional fulfillment, purpose, and joy, you may be at the wrong place. Or not. We will find out. So this morning's talk has four sections so that you'll know where you are at any given time. So I'm going to talk about my grandmother, and we're going to talk about John Donne and his presentation on cups. Sometimes he uses pens, but I'm going to borrow his cup presentation. And then I'm going to talk about a time at MZMC in the early morning in the winter time. And then I'm going to finally get to the core of the talk, which is on appeal and response, inquiry and response arise together. So the overwhelming theme through the whole talk is relinquishment. So my grandmother had a very difficult life. Her father was a Welsh-speaking, circuit-riding Congregationalist minister who rode maybe horses, maybe trains, I don't know, across the West and Midwest, speaking to Welsh-speaking communities as they were scattered about. My grandmother had a memory of seeing longhorn cattle going through Kansas City. So that's quite a while ago. And my grandmother's mother ended up dying of tuberculosis because she was nursing a Union soldier who either escaped or survived Andersonville, but came down with tuberculosis. And my grandmother's mother came down with tuberculosis and died. And then my grandmother had the stereotypical mean stepmother. She was so mean that my grandmother's brother, my great uncle Thomas J. Evans, ran away from home when he was 13. And through a series of very fortunate circumstances, became a very prosperous pharmacist in Newark, Ohio. But my grandmother became a pretty miserable person. And when she was living with my Uncle Bernard, and when my Uncle Bernard died, my grandmother came to live with us. And she was really, really hard on my mother. I never saw her show any respect or love or affection for my mother. She was very manipulative and disrespectful, and it was driving my mom to distraction. So this was when I was maybe in the middle of junior high. And by the time I went away to college, my mom couldn't really take it anymore. So she talked to her two brothers, surviving brothers, they would each take my grandmother for 3 months. And that was the plan. So I had an uncle in Cleveland, and I had an uncle on Long Island. So this kind of aspect of how difficult my grandmother was, we dropped her off in Cleveland, and that lasted 2 weeks before my uncle in Cleveland said, we can't handle this anymore. So then we dropped my grandmother off on Long Island, and that lasted 3 days. So these are difficult. This is a difficult person. So at the same time, the reason my grandmother was becoming even more difficult was because dementia was setting in. And dementia at that time was not very well known and kind of common for older people. And my grandmother was old from the time I ever remember her. She was old. My mother was the last of her children, and my mother was much younger than my uncles. So my mom, eventually, very difficult, put my mom or my grandmother in a nursing home. And when she came to visit my grandmother, because my grandmother had been so difficult for the nursing room staff, they had ended up doping her up, which is something they used to do in nursing homes and maybe still do with difficult people. And my mom couldn't stand to have that. So she put her in a much, much nicer nursing home called the Welsh Home outside of Cleveland, which was basically for Welsh people of Welsh ancestry. And that was a nice place. And I came home from college. I didn't come home from college very often. I've been criticized for that by certain people in the family. But my mom said, you and your brother should go up and visit your grandmother. So we're on the way towards Cleveland, and we're about 2/3 of the way there. And my younger brother's driving, and he says, oh, she won't recognize you. And I thought, what? And so we got there, and my grandmother was in kind of a dementia senility. She had merged various generations of children, her children and my mom's children, and she had stories all mixed up, and she was very talkative, which was unusual. And somehow that disturbed me a great deal. And when I went back to college, I ended up smoking a lot of pot to try to deal with that. And what I found out was that really didn't work. And then I didn't have to worry so much about ever, becoming a stoner, because this isn't working, no matter how hard I try. My grandmother lived to be 100 years old, and we had a big birthday party for her when she was 100 years old. And when the whole family showed up, and a lot of other people showed up, but not a lot of my grandmother's friends showed up because they were all dead. And by the time she was 80, she was complaining that all her friends were dead. So we went to this birthday party, and my grandmother was happy and smiling and giggling, and she was like a little girl. And I don't think before that time I had even seen my grandmother smile. It was very, very weird, very strange to me. And she was having a great time, and she didn't know anybody, but the staff there was wonderful to her, and she was very trusting of the staff, and it was just strange. So sometimes at Open Arms, where I volunteer, do kitchen work and meal packing, we talk about such things. And this older Asian woman, I was talking about how, manipulative and kind of mean my grandmother was until she was 100 years old, and then she turned into this sweet child. And this older Asian woman, who I just find her endearing, said she could no longer hold her agenda. And that really struck me because this is the theme of relinquishment. So, I mean, we all would like to be this happy, sweet child, but it's like, I don't want to be that happy, sweet child if I don't have any identity, if I don't. So the thing that was missing was this choice, the choice of relinquishment, the choice of letting go of this identity, of this manipulative mean streak. But I don't think we want to be that sweet child person unless we still have this balance. But what struck me when that Taiwanese woman said that is she could no longer hold her agenda, is to hold our agenda, to hold our identity, to hold all these, it takes a lot of maintenance. It takes a lot of maintenance. And I've even heard in some Buddhist circles that, because the self really doesn't exist, it requires a lot of maintenance. A lot of maintenance. So that's phase one. My grandmother couldn't hold her agenda. And the idea also is, we think as we're getting older, yeah, physical things are going to break down, but we don't like to think about mental things breaking down, but everything's going to break down. So you either learn to surrender or it's going to be taken away. In my grandmother's case, it was taken away. The choice was taken away. So now, phase two. John Donne gives this presentation quite often. I've seen it, 4 or 5 times, sometimes with a pen, sometimes with cups. The last time he did it with cups, he had a cup that said, "I am not a cup." Gives you kind of a clue. So John Donne is a Tibetan practitioner. He's a favorite of Roshi Joan Halifax at Upaya. He does workshops at Upaya quite often. He's a professor at University of Wisconsin-Madison. So this involves props. So I have props today. These are cups or mugs. So he'll start out and say, are these cups? Are these mugs? What makes them mugs? If I hold this up here, you have the presumption that there's another side to this, but you're only seeing it in 2 dimensions, right? But what makes it a cup? What makes it a mug? Are these different or are they the same? They're mass manufactured, but we could find differences between them. They're similar, but how precise do we want to be to say that they're identical? Where do we draw that line to say, oh yeah, they're the same? They're not the same because they don't occupy the same space. So they can't be the same, but we can say that they're identical. But we create this idea of a cup. And in Western civilization, the ideal is often idealized. The idea of a cup is more important than the actual experience of a cup. And I think what I get from this is the same idea, is that our idea of a cup is a construction and it requires a lot of maintenance. My idea of a cup has a lot to do with all the cups and mugs I've ever seen throughout my life. And so those are all in some kind of like database somewhere. And out of that conglomeration, you kind of create this idea of a cup. And then when we see a cup, we say, oh, that's a cup. But there's this sense, this weight, this, does a cup need a handle? Yeah, a cup needs a handle. If it doesn't have a handle, what do we call it then? And we call this a mug because of I don't know, a mug has a certain overlap with cup, but a mug is a little different. And funny, when I was looking up these in the cupboard, I was thinking that the thickness of this was even thicker than it is, because in my mental projection of these particular cups, I thought this was much thicker, but it's not. But the idea is we maintain this definition of cup, and it takes maintenance. There's no real reason for us to relinquish that definition of cup, but the problem is balance. If we only see the balance from and dismiss the actual perception of cup, then and move right into the idealized idea of cup, then we're missing a lot. So this is, I can think, what the teaching, what John Donne is trying to get to. So I think we know in various places, in various situations, we will warp our perception to fit our definitions. So Ted O'Toole gave an incredible talk once that I heard at MZMC, where he had a new home theater system, and he hooked it up to watch a movie, and the movie was playing all his favorite songs, and he thought, oh, what an incredible, artistic development from this director, that he played this song and then that song and that song, and then about 2/3 of the way through, he realized he had merged those two things together. It wasn't he didn't have the soundtrack from the movie. He had the soundtrack from one of his tapes going at the same time, but he had merged them together. So he had warped his perception to fit that movie. And we do that with all kinds of things. We do that with people. We do that with race. We do that with homeless. We do that with it doesn't take much in this era to see conspiracy theorists who go to great lengths to warp perception to fit a conspiracy, but it provides something. It provides something. So I've been reading this book, Compassion and Emptiness in Early Buddhist Meditation by Bhikkhu Analayo. I hope I said that right. And it's a very interesting book, but it's not Zen. It's not Zen at all. It's very, what he's talking about here is a very kind of step-by-step moving into the understanding of emptiness. But he does bring out a lot of interesting points. And we've heard this story before of, this is a Udana tale by the ascetic Bahia. So Bahia is living in a pretty distant part of India, and he's thinking, I wonder if I'm an arhat. Well, actually, this is kind of interesting to me, because if you really were an arhat, would you be thinking? It should have been his first clue that he's not an arhat, that he's thinking, am I an arhat? So he goes to somebody and he asks, are you? And he says, no. He says, well, who could tell me what to do to get there? And he says, well, there's this guy, the Buddha. He's a long way away, but you'll find him. And so this is the story where this guy shows up when the Buddha's out collecting alms, and the Buddha says, "Oh, this isn't the right time or place for this. You know, I got things to do here." But the guy is persistent over and over again. He's persistent. And finally the Buddha breaks down. And so thereupon the Buddha gives him a succinct instruction according to which he should remain conscious of just bare sense experience as a way to transcend dukkha. So back to the cup, bare sense experience. So I think a lot of the early Buddhism is talking about bare sense experience, present moment awareness, to rebalance things, to rebalance away from our living in a world of concepts and constructions, and realizing there is a world that's going on with present moment awareness and bare sense experience as a way to transcend dukkha. So the way the story is told in here, this teaching immediately places the devotee into he becomes an arhat immediately, like that, because he's ready. But the same succinct instruction given in another discourse in the Samyutta Nikaya, and it's parallel to the monk, never mind, starts with an M, does not have the same effect right away, since this monk does not become an arhat right on the spot. Nevertheless, he does reach full liberation after sustained practice. This shows the transformative potential of this brief instruction can also unfold for those who have not yet reached the high degree of inner maturity of someone like Bahia. In fact, this monk features elsewhere in the discourses as someone obsessed with irrelevant philosophical speculations and as someone with a weak understanding of the Dharma. In short, the Bahia instruction is not only for those who are highly developed. So basically, the instructions to that monk are see by limiting to seeing, hear by limiting to hearing, feel by limiting to feeling, cognize by limiting to cognizing. So I had to look up cognizing, and cognizing is basically perception, recognizing things. So much later in this book, it talks about how we recognize things. And not only do we warp things to fit our conceptions, but when we're in an experience, we tend to fix on the characteristic of that experience, which is the most permanent, because we're interested in stability, we're interested in control, we're interested in being able to recognize things. So we tend to focus on these things. They have a clever little word for it, but it's the characteristic of things that are most permanent. So there's a story that the son of a father goes off and becomes a monk, and then he comes back home, and from a distance the father chases him away because he doesn't recognize him as his son. He just recognizes him as one of those crazy monks who have taken his son away from him because he's got a shaved head and he's wearing robes, and he's from a distance he doesn't recognize him. But one of the servants is about to throw out food, and he approaches her, and she recognizes him because she, even though he has a shaved head and is wearing robes, she recognizes his feet, she recognizes his hands, she recognizes his voice, because these are the characteristics that are more permanent that we focus on to give us some clue as to be able to move through the world. So, right, that's phase 2, and I've got 2 more phases to go. Okay, phase 3. I don't know if this was 1989 or 1990. It makes for a better story in 1990, but I think it's 1989. Katagiri Roshi was sick. He was sick upstairs. And I started, for some reason, deciding to go to early morning Zazen. So I didn't go to the earliest morning Zazen. I went to second sitting. And it was winter. It was very, very cold winter and very, very quiet. And most of the time, it was just Shokin and I. And I don't know if that was a time when there were already senior students like 24/7 upstairs or not. But it was just Shokin and me. And at one point, I did this, I don't know for how long. I can't remember. I don't know if it was 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months. But it had a big effect on me. And at some point, somebody on a bicycle started showing up and sitting with us. And that was very nice because there was just somebody else there. And it was very quiet. And I want to read something that is very essential kind of Ketagiri Roshi that talks about this kind of quiet. So it's 2 paragraphs. This is continuous effort. Stand up straight, but secondly, make continuous effort until you can see the bottom of the river. Make continuous effort itself is to reach the bottom of the river. Remember this point. So I'll read that again. Make continuous effort itself is to reach the bottom of the river. Remember this point. After making the effort for many, many years, and then you can see the bottom of the river, that's not real effort. Real effort is identical with seeing the bottom of the river. That means you have to stand up straight first. Whatever happens, then next. Make continuous effort to move toward the bottom of the river. That's all we have to do. Second paragraph. That is a very quiet practice. No commentary, nothing to say, no showiness. So that's why if you see your life deeply, you cannot say anything. Very quiet. While you can comment on your life, it is not yet touching the bottom of the river. If you understand really deeply, there is nothing to say. Very naturally, understanding human life deeply makes you quiet, but it doesn't mean keep silent. No. From this silence, from this no words, lots of words come up naturally, just like a spring comes up from the ground. So sitting there, knowing that Roshi was very sick upstairs and there was a good likelihood that he wouldn't survive because otherwise he would be downstairs. He was that sick already in the winter of '89. He gave, according to the transcripts, he gave one talk in January of 1989, and it was about dying. It was about death, how to deal with it, how to deal with life and death. And you can have a concept of impermanence, that things are going to change, but it's not the same as actually having that invade your body. So I've had the experience of being in a lot of rooms where people were dying, and things do get very quiet because you run out of things to say. You don't know what to do. You don't know, you want to help, but you don't know how to help. You want to be there, but you don't want to be there, but you do want to be there. And it's just something that penetrates your body, and it's very, very quiet. And it's like, they talk, especially in this book on by the Bhikkhu, talks about tranquility and insight. And in my life, I don't think I would have gotten as much understanding or as many lessons except for all the turbulence of being in these rooms where people are very, very sick. And it really touches you at a very deep level. And it was very, very, very quiet. So in the organization I was into earlier in my life, Divine Light Mission, they made a big deal of being in a particular mind space when you were dying. They said, when you're dying, you should be meditating. And if you can't be meditating, you should be thinking, remembering a time when you were meditating. Well, I've seen a lot of people close to me dying, and none of them were in a mental state to be meditating or remembering a time they were meditating. But if I were to be able to remember a time when I was meditating, I would remember that time when it was just a few of us at MZMC, and it was very, very quiet, and it was a presence. It was just a presence. Silence is not an absence. Silence in that case was this presence. And I remember talking to another teacher one time saying, before I did that, all this talk about beings in other spaces and stuff, it just seems strange to me. But now I'm not so sure, because that silence was so full. That silence was so full of something. And then what would happen, maybe 2/3 of the way through these sittings in the morning. So I would sit from 10 to 6 to 6:30, and then I would leave before service to get to work at 7, so I could be home at 3:30, 4 o'clock. But about, I don't know, maybe 20 after 6, almost every morning, there would be a crow up the hill from MZMC by the Greek Orthodox Church. Crows like to be in high trees so they can see things. And this crow would call out in the morning, and the crow would be sleepy, and it would be cold, and it would just do this, caw, caw, caw thing. And it would be croaky and raspy, and it's like, that crow is sleepy and cold. And it's like, crows are very smart, very familial, very social. So when crows do that, they're basically giving a status report. It's not so much in the vocabulary. They have a pretty extensive vocabulary, but in that particular vocabulary, they're giving a status report, and it's mostly in the tone of their how they're doing it. As if they're saying everything's okay, everything's going on, is all right. And then the most strange thing, from way across the lake, there'd be another crow. It would be very faint, and it would be sleepy, and it would be croaky, and it would be cold, and it would answer that crow and say, yeah, everything's okay over here too. And I took great comfort in that, because the natural world is going on. The natural world is moving ahead. In crow world, at least everything's okay. And it was nice, because you're sitting with, realizing you're not the only ones. There's crows outside that are part of that world too, and part of your world. And then one day, the guy who was with the bicycle, we never spoke, and he just comes up and he says, I'm leaving. And well, we're leaving. And I said, yeah, we're leaving. And he says, no, I'm leaving the state. And oh, geez, that really hurt, because I didn't know the guy. But at the same time, when you sit with someone in that kind of silence, you do get to know them. And it was a comfort to have that company. But there were still, Shokin was still there. The crows were still there. But it was a very important time in my life. And I want to move on to hurry up to the meat of the whole talk. Is about appeal and response. So Hokyo Sanmai, Song of the Treasure Mirrored Samadhi, in the sutra it says, inquiry and response come up together. This is from one of Mike's Kikon's transcripts about appeal and response. Here it says spiritual communion between the Buddha and the practitioner, the Buddha and you. Spiritual communion means interacting communion of appeal and response. Appeal means, for instance, I appeal for help. I ask you to help, not ask. Appeal is a more strong meaning. I appeal in many ways, spiritually, materialistically, anyway, even if I don't do this, even if I do something particular, still I appeal to you constantly for help. So I appeal not to a particular I for help. This appeal is not open to a particular existence. I appeal to the whole universe for help. In this case, the whole universe means you don't know what it is. You're in that don't know, that whole don't know space. But you're appealing. You realize there is nothing to ask for help in this world, but you realize there is something you can appeal to beyond the human samsaric world, even though you don't know what it is. So at that time, how do you do it? You pray. We don't hear about praying too much in Buddhism, but I think almost everybody who's been a serious practitioner has come to this state of appeal. So it is pray. You pray for your life or others' lives. Pray to what? Not to something particular, to the vastness of space and existence. How do you do this in a concrete way? You look up to the sky and pray. What's in the sky? We don't know. Sky is called Akasha in Sanskrit. Akasha is characterized by no obstruction, nothing to obstruct, nothing to interact with. Akasha allows all beings to be functioning in peace and harmony. So a lot of times, sky and emptiness are conjoined in Buddhism, Akasha. So you don't know what space is. When you look up to the sky and pray, please help me, or something like that, you don't know what space is. But spiritually, in a deep sense, you already understand what space is. That's why naturally you look up to the sky and pray, and also to the altar in a church and the altar in a Buddhist temple. The altar is a little higher than you, so you always look up to the upper space, and then you pray. And when you pray, you kneel down to the floor. That means you become lower. In other words, you become humble. You really become humble. And then at that time, you look up to the sky and pray. Intellectually, you don't understand it, but spiritually, everyone knows this. And then response. At that time, response comes from the whole universe, space, Akasha, and then this is called the whole universe. I use the different terms, spirit of the universe, spirit of Akasha, whatever. And then very naturally, if you completely feel that spirit of the universe and appeal for the help or appeal for the coming alive in your everyday life, very naturally, you can be one with the universe. That is the response. In other words, if you try to reach out your hand to the universe reaches out its own hands. This is a theme that I even remember before I started reading these transcripts that Katagiri Roshi would say. You may not think that you're ready to reach out, but you reach out anyway, and the universe reaches out back to you. And then the Buddha, the spirit of the universe, and you, the path of your life and the path of the universe, become one, interconnected, crossing each other. So there's more to read, but I'm already over. But I wanted to share something that also from my Divine Light Mission time. There were various turning points in that. But the Guru had great spiritual power. His darshan, putting my forehead to his feet, I could walk about 30 feet and then just sat down because I didn't want to walk anymore. I was seeing trails. Felt wonderful, felt incredibly high. that's just one of many experiences. This guy had a lot of power. So I thought, man, if I ally myself, he was called Lord of the Universe. If I ally myself with the Lord of the Universe, I should be able to get what I want out of the universe. I should be able to have a wonderful life. I should be able to bargain. I should be able to bargain with the Lord of the Universe. But at some point, I realized this is not working at all. So I came up with this idea that if I can't have things the way I want, at least help me understand the way that things have to be the way they are. And it's like the universe responded. It's like the universe was not responding to me wanting things the way I wanted them. But as soon as I said, well, help me understand the why things have to be the way they are, it says, the universe responded, you want homework? I can give you homework. You're going to get a lot of homework. This is your homework. And things have been a lot different since then, believe me. So this is appeal and response. Appeal and response are simultaneous. Appeal and response are, this is a difficult concept, I know, but appeal and response are simultaneous. If you're in that position of relinquishing control, relinquishing the idea that you can do something, if you're in that position, you've already done most of the work. If you're asking for help, you've already done 80% of the work, because now you're in a position to be receptive. And as soon as you're receptive, things start to happen. So Byakuya and Judith Regier used to talk a lot about Shantideva and the way of the Bodhisattva. So I took this class from Upaya workshop with John Dunn and Roshi Joan Halifax on Shantideva. And Shantideva, he's a messed up guy. Maybe that's why people like Shantideva so much. But Shantideva was not doing well. And his fellow monks were making fun of him all the time. And he was not a good student. He's not doing well at all in this environment. And at some point, in that environment, you had to give a talk to demonstrate, to present your understanding. And Shantideva was like, man, how am I going to do this? And according to the book, The Way of the Bodhisattva, Manjushri showed up and started tutoring him. But I don't think there was a Manjushri outside of Shantideva. I think this is appeal and response. I think Shantideva just started doing his homework, just started being in that place where, oh, this isn't going very well. I need help. And as soon as you put yourself in that position, somehow something happens. Something wonderful happens. But it's not easy to get in that position. And like I said, if it wasn't for turbulent times, I never would have put myself in that position. So I end by saying, through the day, Kanzeon, through the night, Kanzeon, this very moment arises from boundless clarity. This very moment is boundless clarity. So you're certainly welcome to disagree with me.
Thank you. And I'll just intervene to say, please share your own stories, ask questions. We have plenty of time for interaction with our speaker, Ryushin. Please make use of it. Meanwhile, I'll figure out how to unpin him.
Okay, go ahead.
I disagree.
Thank you.
Boundless clarity. Oh boy. Okay. It's I'm working on that one. Still working on that one. But for the time being, it's been a little foggy lately. But in any event, I'll just research that. Ask why is that the case? I'll take your admonishment seriously. Since you started talking about your grandma, it brought up a little story for me. It's a new story. None of you have heard this story before, so this is a new one. When I was, most of you know, I was down in Kansas City clearing out my sister's belongings. She died last April, and she never threw anything away. Well, she could, but some things she wouldn't, like say her registration for her car, like 10 years ago. It's like she thought that was like an important document that you can never let go of. So she just had trouble discerning about what to hang on to and what not to. And if there was any hesitation about, no, this is important stuff, then she would keep it. So I have these piles and piles and piles of papers and stuff to go through because I don't want to throw anything important away. And but in the midst of these big piles of stuff, I found this little journal, and it was written by my grandmother, and it wasn't very big. It was like a stenographer's book, and that's how I first started journaling when I was like 16. So that was kind of a little surprise. She used the same kind of book that I first started journaling in. And I read it's not very long. It's only like 40 or 50 pages. But and I haven't read it, but the first entry was written in 1910. And she was born in 1890. So she's writing as a 20-year-old woman. And like you, Ryushin, I always thought of her as like this old person. She, from the time I ever met her or whatever, she was like the epitome of old. And so now I'm reading this something that she wrote when she was a 20-year-old woman. And the first thing is I don't know if she was married then or not, but she talks about her husband, at least her future husband, even if it wasn't her husband then. I don't know. I'd have to look that up. But anyway, he was going away to do something at someone else's house. And she started talking about her memories. And her first memory was being in a covered wagon when she was 4 years old, going from someplace to someplace. And that's all I've read. And I'm kind of holding it there as a little treasure that I can read. So anyway, there was that. And you mentioned some tragedy in your grandmother's life. Well, she's the only woman or person I know, and there's probably a reason for this, who, as we all know, we all have people who have lost a child, a parent who's lost a child. And for me, that's always been like the most, of course, it's not possible in my life, but in my imagination, be like the worst kind of pain you could endure. But my grandma had another kind of pain that I think might even be worse, is one of, after a fight, her oldest son just disappeared with, he had a fight with my grandpa. I think about a girlfriend. I mean, all this is secret stuff, in the family, so we never talked about it. But what I understand is they had a fight. My grandpa was not impressed with his son's girlfriend or something like that, and they had a fight about it. And then he disappeared. He just disappeared, and they never heard anything from him again. So it's just been a little thing in my life that, wow, that could happen. That could happen. And well, that's I think that's all. And oh, then you said, oh, the thick. I thought you brought up another interesting point for me. You talked about the thickness of the cup, that it wasn't as thick as the mug, as thick as you thought it was. Well, it reminded me of being in the dentist, and I had my first crown put on. and the dentist, he's grinding down your tooth, to put something on top of it. And I kept feeling it with my tongue. I said, you've ground the whole tooth away. There's nothing left except a little tiny spindle, tiny. I mean, like a toothpick. I said, that's all that's left. He said, no, that's just your perception. There's really a lot there left. I've just ground out a little. but talking about like a perception, my whole tooth is gone. I was quite worried about it, but he was very reassuring that no, there's no big deal. And the last comment I have is one of my favorite lines from the Mindfulness Sutra that says, this is a passage that occurs, I think it's 23 times in the sutta, but it's like, of course, in the sutra, there's mindfulness of all the different facets of life, your physical being, your feelings, your emotions, this, that, and the other thing, consciousness. But it always comes down, there's this refrain where it says, we examine with awareness the arising factors, the disappearing factors, or both the arising and disappearing factors of a certain phenomena that has arisen. And finally it says, or just to the bare extent possible for continued mindfulness to continue. It's like, whatever we're thinking, oh, it's arising, it's disappearing, or whatever, but it's like just finally, the final line is just this continued mindfulness effort that to the bare extent possible for continued mindfulness. So it's like, it's really a moving passage to me. And so I just thought I would share that with you, because you mentioned something about bare extent somewhere in your talk. That's all I have. Thank you. Thank you for your talk, Ryushin.
The basic instruction for mindfulness is, just bare awareness and watching things come and go, and don't make judgments. And the judgments are all about this maintenance level we have of constructions. So it's pretty clear the judgments are coming from, some kind of, the reality of our maintained reality is different from the bare awareness of perceptual reality. And I forgot to mention these cups are Kartak cups, if anybody remembers Kartak. So on one side, there's Latin, because at least one of the brothers went to MIT and was quite educated. So it says non impediti rationi cogitatius, which on the other side says unencumbered by the thought process. It's quite a Zen cup from Kartak, unencumbered by the thought process, just bare awareness. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, I forgot to change it to Tenryu, but I'm Elizabeth.
Tenryu.
No, it's fine. It's fine. It's good to see you. Thank you for that wonderful talk. I had a recent experience where I think that matches what you're saying. So this was with my daughter, who I don't see much. We went to Poland together, my husband, daughter, and I, to visit some relatives, and it was very intense and wonderful. And then she's, we split up. We came home. She stayed in Copenhagen and all that. And she was coming here to buy a car from Dan Ryan, if you remember Dan. Anyway, she flew here after Seishin at Dharma Rain that she had. And I just had left Hokyoji. I was with Fish, we were studying Shantideva. Was this just last week or 2 weeks ago? And And so we had her for a day or two, and we were going to go out to dinner. And I felt myself really graspy, really attached, like, oh, I want to, like, talk about Poland, talk about this thing. What did you study? What did you learn? Here's what I was studying. Here's what I learned. And I was just really working myself up in a froth because I love my daughter and I don't get to see her a lot. Even though we were traveling together, it was just a different scene. And so I just prayed and I said, just open my heart, just let go, open my heart, expand my heart. And then I'm practicing, may all beings expand their hearts. So it's not just Elizabeth, stop, but more, may everyone in this situation expand their hearts. Because this dinner was with my dear husband and my dear daughter. And so we sat down and I'm just praying, working with my mind. And I just got into a place of, oh, come on, Elizabeth, she's 31, like mom has an agenda. And it, as the dialogue unfolded, it was quite beautiful. And we did talk about Dharma things and we did talk about Poland, and it without my, I just kind of stepped aside. And it was I was aware of what was happening, and it was very, wow. I don't know if it's not exactly an example, but it just was very opening. And when I'm in a stuck situation, that's my prayer, is expanding heart. Can I expand my heart? And it's not like I get a response from the universe with its own arms, but something changes. It just changes. So thank you.
That's it. I mean, the appeal is the response. It's simultaneous. It's even those crows, I mean, in some way appealing, there was some unspoken appeal that, provide me a sign that things are going to go on, things are going to be okay. And it's like crows wake up and say, yeah, things are okay here. So I think, every day I ask for help from Avalokiteshvara. That's what the Chonen Kanzeon, Bonen Kanzeon, through the day, Kanzeon through the night, Kanzeon. It's like, as soon as you open to help something, that's the work, that's the effort. So
Thank you. Thank you all. We're getting close to the official time to stop. If there are other people that really would like to ask a question or really like to share an experience, this is your chance to do that. We could go over, but only if we want.
sure. Ryushin.
Ryushin, thank you for your talk. It's funny, maybe not funny, haha. I was reading The Essence of Zen this morning by, Seikei Harada, Daigaku Rume's translation. And he was talking, the passage I was reading was talking about this very thing. He talks about there being a vase of flowers on the table, and that, you talk about just perception is just seeing the flowers the minute before you go, oh, those are beautiful, those are ugly. But the sort of Sandokai aspect of the whole thing is that vase of flowers is on the table because somebody thought, oh, those are beautiful, let me buy those and bring those home. So how do you balance the two?
There was a time during session at MZMC when I was supposed to take care of the flowers. There were peach colored gladiolas, with the flowers up a stalk. And I went out to the to the porch, and I looked at the gladiolas, and some of them were kind of past their prime. But the more I looked at them, the more I thought, oh, this is really, these are beautiful, even as they kind of, degenerating. It's kind of precious, just the way it is. So I didn't do anything, and then of course I got yelled at for not doing anything. Don't know.
It's certainly the challenge. I mean, there's lots of different where Kazuwaku Tanahashi talks about Sandokai as being the balance of boundaries and boundlessness. I know sometimes I don't pray, but I just say, like, what happens if you just stop telling stories about what's going on? What if you just stop telling the story about what you think is going on? But sometimes you need the story. So it's hard. It's hard.
Yeah, the problem is we get trapped in the story. So just the idea of stopping the story is kind of this relinquishment theme of just stop the story for a while. But yeah, we need the story. Otherwise, if I have a concept of cup and mug, and you have a concept of cup and mug, we can actually communicate about cups and mugs. But if we didn't have if we just had the bare essentials, which is it's kind of odd that there's a lot of the stuff in early Buddhism just pounds this over and over again, bare awareness, present moment awareness. It's like, well, yeah, but there's all this other stuff going on. And even in this book, at some point, he has to come around and say, concepts and not all bad. I mean, how would we develop wisdom if we didn't have some kind of framework to hang it on? So, but those are his words. Those aren't the Buddha's words. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I guess I would say there's not really, balancing is a concept. We're never really out of balance, is what I find out when I do this work myself. This talk is dear to me, Ryushin, because the whole way I got into Buddhism was by surrendering. It was like I was in my 40s and I just thought, I keep trying to solve my life and I keep failing. And finally, I just kind of thoroughly just sort of said, I don't know what to do. So that was when I got a new concept, which was, well, how about I just kind of go wherever it seems like there might be happiness. And it wasn't directed, it wasn't and I have to say I've been sold on that practice ever since then. Just and the very fact is the giving up part and the opening up part just happens, and when it's not happening, it's still just happening. In the sense of that's life. That's life.
And I think that goes back to something I wanted to reread after listening to the Crows about this continuous effort, because things are moving on. The sun's coming up. The sun goes down. The seasons change. This is continuous effort. Stand up straight until you can see the bottom of the river. I mean, the crows wake up. If it's not that crow, it's going to be some other crow waking up. So things keep moving. Even when you don't want them to, even when you really don't want to move ahead, things keep moving. You have to You have to move along with it. So when it became clear when my dad had Alzheimer's, it's either surrender it or you're going to lose it, but it's going to go away one way or the other. Which do you want to do?
I think we
So
just
yeah,
started, Alex. Anybody else? This is the moment. All right, I'm going to take the opportunity to say thank you so much, Ryushin, for your talk. It was delightful. And now it's time for closing commentary. I just want to let you know that we have more talks coming up. Kikon is going to be with us next week, and then in the rest of July, we'll have either Dokai or Sosan, because that's the week that the Clouds-in-Water session is happening. But you'll know when you get to the Sunday talk who's talking. And we also have Onryu Kennedy, who will be talking on the last Sunday in July. Upcoming in August, we as Hokyoji have the family weekend and the Jewel Mirror session, where Reiren Gumbel and Daigaku Rume will join Dokai in leading a sesshin. It's usually a much appreciated sesshin, so I urge you to consider it. It's a wonderful thing to do. And is there anything else? Let's see. I don't think so. I think that's all the news from Hokyoji. So let us close with our 4 vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to realize it. Have a good week. What was your phrase, Elizabeth? Something, whatever it was.
Expand our hearts. Maybe all beings expand our hearts.
May your hearts expand this week.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.